Let us look at the figure of Jesus Christ. For some, he is a historical teacher, for others the Son of God, but for many he remains a moral reference point. But what if the story of Jesus is not only theology, but psychology as well? What if this narrative is not just about belief, but about the deep structure of the human psyche? Carl Jung suggested that religious symbols are not accidental. They are expressions of realities that already exist within us. So the question becomes, who is Jesus, psychologically, as a person, and as a symbol? Jung proposed that beneath our personal experiences lies a deeper layer of the mind, the collective unconscious. Within it live archetypes, primordial patterns, images that repeat across cultures and centuries, such as the hero, the shadow, the mother, the wise old man, and ultimately the self. In Jung's psychology, the self is not the ego, it is the totality of the psyche, the union of opposites, consciousness and unconsciousness, integrated into wholeness. Modern systems such as the MBTI draw loosely from Jung's ideas about cognitive functions, intuition, thinking, feeling, sensation, but archetypes operate at a deeper symbolic level than personality types, much closer to the core structure of the psyche. If Jung, the intellectual father of archetypal psychology, were to examine the figure of Jesus, he would not first ask, what personality type was he? He would ask, what archetype does this symbol embody? And Jung's answer was radical. Christ symbolizes the self, not merely a teacher, not merely a prophet, but the image of psychic totality. The self represents the reconciliation of opposites, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, sacrifice and authority. The narrative arc of Christ, descent, suffering, death, and resurrection mirrors what Jung called individuation, the journey towards integration, the confrontation with the shadow, the death of the fragmented self, the emergence of wholeness. If translated cautiously into typological language, this symbolic pattern may resemble the intuitive introvert, visionary, inwardly guided, oriented towards transcendent meaning. That is secondary, the archetype is primary. If one were to cautiously classify the personality in MBTI terms, the figure of Jesus aligns most closely with an INFJ profile, an introverted intuitive, oriented not towards immediate reality, but toward the future of moral transformation. He speaks in parables, symbolic, layered, abstract, rather than literal instruction, suggesting dominant intuitive perception. He withdraws into solitude before decisive moments, indicating inward orientation rather than external stimulation. His teaching centers on an inner change rather than external law. The kingdom is within, yet his mission is outwardly ethical and relational. Forgiveness, compassion, reconciliation, and outward moral orientation towards collective harmony. He challenges rigid legalism not through rebellion for his own sake, but through a deeper, internally derived vision of meaning. And yet, beyond typology, what fascinates me most is something simpler. He was human. He thirsted. He hungered. He felt fatigue. He inhabited flesh just like we all do. Reading the Gospels, I was struck by how rarely he appears visibly disturbed. There are only two moments that seem to break the calm surface. One, when he overturns the tables in the temple, confronting hypocrisy and corruption, and another, when he curses the fig tree in the desert, an act both symbolic and strangely severe. Those flashes of intensity do not diminish the image, they deepen it, because they reveal not a distant abstraction, but a human being capable of emotion, yet not ruled by it, a glimpse of integration rather than repression. But personality is on the surface. Let us now return to Christ as a symbol. Every symbol of light casts a shadow, and the danger begins when we refuse to see it. In Jung's terms, even the image of Christ as the embodiment of goodness and psychic wholeness generates a compensatory shadow. When a culture projects absolute light into one figure, it risks disowning its own darkness. Evil is no longer recognized as a human potential within, it becomes externalized, rejected. Jung warned that what remains unconscious does not disappear, it returns, distorted, intensified, and often destructive. The psychological task is not to worship the light while denying the shadow, it is to integrate both. Because wholeness is not purity, wholeness is integration. But what does this mean for us? That without confronting our shadow, our devotion to the light becomes psychological denial rather than transformation. The transformation begins when the ego is crucified, when the identity we cling to collapses, when the shadow we denied stands before us. Only through that symbolic death can the self emerge. Refusing to face the shadow leads to fanaticism, violence, and inner fragmentation, because what is denied does not simply vanish, it accumulates pressure. In purity we say, I am only good. In integration we say, I am capable of evil, but I choose good instead. Even in the biblical narrative, Christ refuses to call upon power to destroy, though he could. The symbol points towards restraint, conscious sacrifice, integration, rather than domination. But in the end, the real question is not whether you believe the symbol. The real question is whether you are living its pattern.